And joining us now, a financial guru, financial expert. In fact, this entire half hour, we're going to talk business. First with David Selig, a federal tax practitioner at Selig and Associates. And then next up, Matt DeBoard from the Huffington Post. But with David, I want to talk two things. Defunding Obamacare, and then the second, the debt ceiling debate that's approaching over the next 2 weeks. Mr. David Selig, how are you, sir?
Hey, fine, and thanks for having me on your program. It's a real pleasure.
Thanks, David. So let's begin. I want to play you a clip from what Barack Obama said today about the debt ceiling. And I'd like your reaction, because when I hear this, we're either listening to somebody who has no concept of how finances work, or there's something wrong with him mentally. I don't know what it is, so let's hear it, and then we'll get your analysis.
Raising the debt ceiling, which has been done over 100 times, does not increase our debt. It does not somehow promote profligacy. All it does is it says, you got to pay the bills that you've already racked up, Congress. It's always a tough vote because the average person thinks raising the debt ceiling must mean that we're running up our debt.
Now, David, when you hear something that insane, what's your reaction? I mean, he's saying, oh, well, if you raise somebody who's going bankrupt, if you bring up their credit limit, that's not going to affect their behavior. How do you analyze that?
Well, I hope I don't offend anyone in your listening audience, but, I believe it was Joseph Goebbels who said, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a whopper, the complete opposite of the truth. And that's what that statement was. This is more debt, no matter how you package it. And right now we are hemorrhaging money. The government is spending like a drunken sailor. No offense to the drunken sailors out there.
Mm-hmm.
And what we really need is to demand that our elected officials be good stewards of our money and not just give in to every whim and caprice that we spend without regard for the future.
Right. It's just a bizarre comment that he would say, oh, well, if we raise the debt ceiling, that's not encouraging more spending. That's absolutely what that means. And to look at that any differently is just strange behavior. Now, Dave, while I have you, I want to talk about defunding Obamacare and what's coming up the pike over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Now, we know what's happened in the House. They've sent a bill to the U.S. Senate, which includes a continuing resolution to keep the government operating, but only if Obamacare gets defunded. Harry Reid in the U.S. Senate is rejecting that, saying that there will be no defunding of Obamacare, and he's going to kick it back to the House of Representatives. But I have a larger question for you, David. No matter what happens politically over the next couple of weeks, if Obamacare does go through, and sadly, I think it will. I think it's going to happen. How long financially can this last before the whole thing goes kaput? What's your vibe on that?
Well, this is the devil in the details. We don't let bad programs go kaput. What we do is we print up more money and we rob Peter to pay Paul. I want to make this very clear to your listening audience because you don't hear this anywhere. I have poured over the books. I want to tell you something. The American people were completely bamboozled, and I will tell you why. When they initially came out with their extrapolations about how many Americans were uninsured, remember, we heard 45 million and such.
Mm-hmm.
That was largely based on the 2010 census. For the first time in American history, we included illegal aliens in the census. Now, here's the devil in the details.
Now, wait, let me stop you for a second. Is the reason why because they wanted that number to be higher? Because the higher that number is, the more it shocks the conscience. Is that the reason why?
Well, yeah, but keep in mind, illegal aliens are excluded from participating in the Patient Protection Act, Obamacare. So in other words, it doesn't even address those people. They're still back in the emergency rooms, still clogging the system, still bankrupting the hospitals. And meanwhile, the average Joe thinks there were all these Americans who were uninsured, when in fact that is not the case.
And what do you think the real number, David? Just give me a ballpark. If you had heard 40 million as of the census in 2010, which includes illegal immigration, what do you think the actual number is?
I think it is probably less than 1/3. And keep in mind, not everybody who is uninsured remains uninsured. There are people who have gotten jobs. There are people who work cyclically. There are people who got married and now are covered under spouses coverage. The whole thing was really a shell game. And we took the bait and we fell for it because it promised something for nothing. But you'll notice, even even the most assertive and strident promoters of Obamacare have sort of backed away from, we're going to pay down the deficit, it's going to lower costs.
Yeah, they don't even try that anymore. The whole it's going to help the deficit and it's going to reduce costs. They don't even go there. And also unions, their biggest supporters, now realize the damage it's going to do to the multi-employer TAF plans. And so unions are pissed. Am I wrong?
No, you hit the nail on the head. It is a shame that they were so myopic. You know, for some reason, people want to believe that you can get something for nothing. And a lot of individuals over the course of history have become very wealthy peddling that trash. But that's what it is.
Yeah, it's a great look, David. It's a great point. It's a great sales pitch. I mean, socialism in theory is a wonderful sales pitch until you realize when you become an adult and you get responsible that at some point you run out of other people's money. I mean, Margaret Thatcher said that socialism ends when you've spent everybody else's money, and it's easy to give something away for free if it doesn't belong to you. So that's why Obama, he's not a doctor, and he's saying, oh yeah, take all the doctors' time and expertise. They spend $100,000 educating themselves, in some cases $200,000 educating themselves. And why shouldn't the doctor's time become somebody else's time? And the doctor should do whatever the government says. And that's an interesting point. Now, David, what do you think will happen over the next 3 weeks with defunding Obamacare? Do you think Obama will give an inch, or do you think this is kind of his baby and there's no way he will give an inch?
Right. I think he is intransigent, but then again, remember, they unilaterally postponed a significant piece of Obamacare. I'm not even sure that was legal, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, and by the way, because you know the legality, you're a federal tax practitioner. Obama said for large businesses, it's not going to be January 1, 2014. We're going to delay it a year. Does he just kind of pick and choose what he decides to enforce? How does that even work?
You know, I want to address that because so much of Obamacare is contingent upon these revenues that they're supposed to receive. And now those revenues are just not there. It's as if the accountants and actuaries who helped craft this mumbo-jumbo put on rose-colored glasses, imagined a perfect scenario where everybody will just pay in to support people who are not paying in and accept a little less so somebody else can accept a little more. You know, one thing that rings true no matter where you go or what time it is that people act in their own best interests. People are largely pragmatic creatures. And as the details are coming to the forefront and as it's touching individuals' pocketbooks, you're starting to see a bit of a backlash. Unfortunately, the country has become so polarized, we no longer concentrate on the hard, cold economic facts, but rather we're treating this like a popularity contest.
Right, and that's what it's become. I mean, Obama, he's more an actor playing a president. I mean, he's a celebrity. He'd never done anything in his life besides give great speeches. And then when we get legislation like this, which, you know, the majority of it was written after to pass Congress, so nobody knew what the heck was in it. That's why Nancy Pelosi said we have to pass it, and she was right. I mean, they had to pass it to find out what was in it because so many new regulations had to be written when you're redesigning 1/6 of the entire American economy. That couldn't be done on the front end, and you couldn't call it a tax on the front end. It was only after it was through the Supreme Court that it became a penalty and a tax. David, last question for you before I let you go. When I look at Obamacare in the aggregate, I see the top, let's say 1%, they're going to be fine because they have the cash, and yeah, they'll pay some more taxes, but they're going to do essentially cash pay, VIP care. The bottom 5 to 10% are getting something for nothing they never had before, and they'll continue to show up at the emergency rooms. It's that middle 85 to 90% middle class, upper middle class America who like their doctor, they like the insurance they had at work, or they were working, 35 hours, and now they're going to get demoted to below 29 hours, or their plan, they could get tossed off, or they're going to get dumped on the exchanges. To me, it's the middle class that ends up hurting the most. Is that how you view it, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, I think you make a good point. The middle class will certainly be hurt, but I think it is really inequitable. I don't think that we as a society can keep penalizing the top achievers, ostensibly to give something to somebody who really has no skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
We have a unreasonable preoccupation with fairness, and it is manifested itself in this very convoluted Gordian knot of law. If anyone wants to try to read the Patient Protection Act, you'd better sit down for quite a while.
Yeah, you'd have to be a sadomasochist. Right. But, David, you know what it is. When they say fair share, Obama's favorite word is fair, and I've decoded that. That's liberalism for more. Fair to them is, the 1% paying everything. I mean, if the top 1% paid 90% in tax, Obama would say it's unfair that they're keeping such a large section of 10% of their wealth. Now, David, I hate to do this. I got to jump to a break, but David Selig, the Chief Financial Officer of Green Energy Management and a federal tax practitioner at Selig & Associates. David, thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
All the best.